Welcome to the third video in the series, Belonging and Inclusion in Identity-Safe Schools, a Guide for Educational Leaders. I'm Becki Cohn-Vargas, one of the authors, and today we're talking about chapters 4 and 5, Assessment and Family Partnerships. These are two very different topics, and we'll spend a little time on each of them. Let me share my screen. Assessment is a very important aspect of identity safety for many reasons. It allows us as educators to monitor our own efforts and our own work and look at our progress in supporting our students. It also helps students learn to monitor their progress, to look at their growth, and to learn from their mistakes and move ahead. But assessment is also something that has caused many inequitable practices that have harmed students of color. So let's look at the process. We need to step beyond colorblindness because we need to look at demographics. We need to foster equal status, but equal status doesn't mean doing the same thing for each student. It means opening opportunities and meeting their needs for equitable outcomes. High expectations have been shown in many, many research studies to make a big difference. When students feel you expect them to achieve and believe that they can, they do better and progress and improve. And formative assessment is a useful tool. It's not the same as the assessments at the end of a learning series. It's assessment during the learning process. And we'll be talking about that a little more too. It's important to center on your goals when you're doing assessment. What are you trying to achieve? Ask the hard questions that will guide your progress. Focus groups and listening tours allow you to hear the voices of the people in your community, both the students and their families. Action research allows educators to look at their practice, to ask questions about what they're trying to do, and then watch as they gather the data from the actual teaching and see what they learn from it. When collecting data, it's important not to collect too much and to think about your guiding questions and your goals so you get the kind of data you need to answer those questions. And the analysis process is important too. We want to ask hard questions. We want to be able to have those conversations. So the process of data analysis can be an experience that's inclusive and that goes deep. And of course, we want to gather stakeholder groups and share both the data process, the purpose, the goals, and the results. We have some great tools for this process, and you can find them on page 38 through 240, and they help you develop your questions, look at what you're going to gather and how you're going to do it, and determine the impact. Let me talk a little bit about WISE feedback. This is actually a research-based strategy that has found that when you communicate those high expectations and say, I have standards and I believe you can meet them, students rise to the occasion, as I said before, and meet those expectations and are ready to hear actual feedback, to listen to ways they can improve, that you can help them and learn how to figure it out for themselves in the future. It's about building trust. It's about making connections, and it works. This is an identity-safe routine that we got from Zaretta Hammond's book. She says, begin with a check-in. Make that connection to the student. Then communicate directly that you have those high standards, you believe the student can meet them, and this is the purpose of our conversation. They will be ready to hear those specific actions that you can suggest for improvement. They'll be able to listen to when you do that. And the research has shown that makes a big difference. Then be sure to have the students paraphrase and tell you what did they hear and what they're going to work on. And set a time for follow-up so they know you mean business, that you're going to check and see how they did. Ultimately, the students are going to learn how to notice when they're progressing, which we often don't, and then what they can do to improve. Formative assessment is a process that we're actually getting students to learn how to do. The educator plays the role of the coach. We help students figure out where they're going, what are their learning goals, and what are the criteria to know if they've achieved those goals. Then they gather the evidence, they look at what they've done, they interpret the evidence. So they look at the different, let's say, a piece of writing and notice, did they meet those goals that they set? What can they do to improve in the future? And then they figure out where to go next. It's a recursive cycle, and it's ultimately something we want everyone to learn how to do on their own. Now we're going to talk a little about family. Our families are an extension of our identity. And that is why it's important to bring the family into the school, as well as to recognize the many different situations and families that students come from. Also to recognize things to be sensitive about when we're working with students and their families, especially if students are in a foster home and not living with their family. The way we engage diverse families and caregivers is we try and support them in supporting their children. At the same time, we're empowering them to be involved in the school, to know what we're doing, and to understand what we're doing and why. And part of that is engaging the larger community where the students live. So you're connecting not only with the families themselves, but the people that they interact with and connect with in their larger community. How do we do this? Well, sometimes we're inviting parents and family and caregivers into the classroom as mentors, as volunteers, as role models. Other times we're working to be sure they understand our academic and social goals that we have for the students. By creating a deeper understanding, we're demystifying what we're trying to do with students. And then we give tools to the families to help them support their children. And ultimately, we do want families to be partners in governance of the school. That needs to be done with relationships that we've built along the way. By connecting with the community, we find out what matters to this community, and we bring in many resources that can help. Sometimes it's as simple as going to the local library and getting to know the librarian. Other times it's going to a gay pride march or a powwow or a different event that the students are doing. And of course, getting to know the community helpers, the first responders, the local doctors and nurses in our community. All of that brings a richness to your school experience. We have a wonderful tool at the end of the chapter called Chapter 5 on family partnerships, which is called community mapping. You can wander through the community with families and get to have them show you around and show you what they like to do in their community and where they go. It brings their pride and their identity safety to another level. So we hope you have understood and learned about the wonderful opportunities you have looking at identity safe assessment and looking at ways you can involve families and the community in your school. Thank you for being here today.